which we'll talk about later, but that Gary actually founded. And I mean, these are the two main owned and operated brands, both Avod, and we also own a smaller SVOD business called Pivot Share.
Great.
I'll just stop there for now.
Henry?
Super. Hi. Well, thanks a lot for having me on. So I'm head of ad products and revenue at Crunchyroll, and Crunchyroll is the sort of like the easiest way to describe it would be like the Netflix for anime. The difference being is obviously we have an SVOD component and then an AVOD component, and obviously the two of those work in symbiosis. So the idea is AVOD is the top of the funnel. It gives the ability of free users to come in and not pay for it, but obviously consume it with ads. And then the idea is obviously over time that they will derive value in both the content, the community, obviously the other features and opportunities, and essentially work on converting them from a free ad-supported user over to a paying subscriber paying us, $8 a month, which is obviously sort of grown, which we've been around for 14 years. We've seen sort of some phenomenal growth and it just keeps growing. So yeah, so that's the space that we work in.
So I want to thank you guys for being here. I want to start out by reading a few stats, which may make it sound like I'm very smart, but I actually got these from my friend Kirby Grimes, who lives and eats stats. Just to kick this off, not to really comment on it, but just to give you a little context. More people have at least one streaming video subscription, 68%, than a traditional pay TV subscription at 65%. Pay TV is not over. That was Kirby's line. 43% of U.S. households still subscribe to both pay TV and streaming video services. We may have a debate about that. The number of digital viewers in the U.S. topped 235 million in 2019, which represents about 72% of the country's population. Advertising makes up 45% of all online video revenue and is projected to grow to almost 60% over the next 10 years. And 46% of OTT customers are willing to pay $10 a month for ad-free services, 25% of free service with some ads. So here's my first question to you guys. AVOD and SVOD, frenemies, they exist, they're codependent. I mean, there seems to be, a versus, because not everybody is going to get both, especially because SVOD costs money. Where do you see where they both stand in terms of the value in the marketplace? Philippe, take it away.
Great. I think it depends what you consider as competing. They both compete for consumer time. So in that sense, we are direct competitors. Obviously, we are tapping totally different revenue sources. So in that sense, we're not. I think that, it seems like at least all the research, at least over the last year or so, has shown that consumers will subscribe to at least 2, maybe 3 SVOD services. And we know the big names, that most people are subscribing to. Now that market is becoming very crowded and very competitive. And I think that's where, especially in our business, which is really movies and TV shows, without the same, vertical focus as Henry. There's a lot of competition. Disney Plus, obviously Roku and some of the Hulu and all the others. So I think on one hand, SVOD is there and it's there to stay. We also know that AVOD is a great complement for most users. They are looking for content that frankly you can't find anymore on Netflix. The type of old TV shows, the movies. Those SVOD services have really promoted their own original content so much that I think they're not necessarily a destination anymore for traditional movies and in all kinds of genre. So that's, I think, how they complement each other. Obviously, with COVID, so many people losing their jobs. and being under intense pressure financially, I think Avod is becoming a bigger player. I think the latest research I've seen was actually that 73% of consumers would prefer to watch ads and to watch their favorite TV show versus paying for an ad-free experience. So there's a clear choice, I think, from the consumer side for certain type of content, at least.
Henry, what do you think?
I think Philippe touched on a lot of very sort of key points, and sort of to echo, I'm also going to say, the worst thing that any panelist can say, which is it does depend. Does depend very much on sort of, the content, your proposition in the marketplace. I think probably the best way to think about it is there's two types of streaming services. There's big and broad. So let's say your Netflix, your Hulus, your Amazon Primes, your YouTubes, HBO Maxes, which have a different range of sort of content genres, whether it's movies, episodic, whether it's anime, whether it's sports, live action, all those kind of things. And then you have your verticalized streaming services. So, Crunchyroll, we're one of them, obviously. In finance, you have Real Vision, gaming, you have Twitch, and, obviously you can sort of bring out these sort of verticals. And then in terms of, to answer the question directly on how does AVOD and SVOD sort of interact, I think what's really interesting to see is those first movers, i.e. Netflix, essentially were able to come out with the position and say SVOD only, we're not doing AVOD, and obviously they've been very vocal in their sort of position of not taking on an AVOD proposition.
So far.
So say that again?
So far,
well, we'll see. But then it's interesting to see then Amazon Prime come out, and then they come out with IMDb as well. So they have an AVOD offering, but a different product. And then if you take it all the way to the spectrum with Peacock, which has just come out, which was going to be an SVOD, and then they just went AVOD only. So they're probably getting into the point where they realize that they probably are hitting that saturation point with consumers. And it's, and if you look at just the general trends and cycles, as a consumer, obviously I don't like to see 10 different sort of $9.99 dings my account every month on the first of the month, right? I'd rather just pay $50 in one go and obviously bundle it up. So I think also what you're seeing is the sort of cycle and the trend go from aggregation, i.e. MVPDs, broken out to silos in direct to consumer, and then you're starting to see micro bundles. Fubo is a fantastic example of this, the way they've gone SVOD with ads, but obviously just focusing on the sports packages. So I think, the takeaway is those first to market and obviously have got a really strong foothold and a moat around themselves in the form of Netflix and those guys. And then obviously those later to the game are obviously having to sort of find out sort of alternative models. And from our perspective, we have that, we get to sort of stand in both sides of the fence in a way and get the AVOD and the SVOD and try and just make them sort of work together as one.
So you both touched on money and subscription fees. You both mentioned that. Let's get into that a little bit. I mean, there is only so much money that any consumer is going to spend on X amount of services. And I'd be curious as to your thoughts about, where is the sweet spot? And I don't mean in terms of the sweet spot of the pricing. I mean in terms of the tolerance level. What is the tolerance level? Because this has a direct impact on all of our businesses. Mm-hmm. I mean, if in fact Philippe is right, and he used the word compliment, I wrote it down because it was an interesting word to use. I mean, I want to talk about whether it's a compliment or whether it's a detriment, but we'll get back to that. But in terms of SVOD and AVOD existing side by side, where is the point where it's going to either hurt one or the other? And then I want to talk about the future of where that might go. Henry, you want to pick that up?
Yeah, well, I think we can just know historically that the top end is somewhere around about $110 because obviously that's what the MVPDs would charge, right? And then that got to the point where then there were other choices outside all of a sudden. So 110 plus 15 or 10 for Netflix, and then another 10 all of a sudden, that's when that model comes down. So I think that's obviously sort of, the top end. And even then that model sort of started to sort of disintegrate in a way. So it's somewhere probably in the range of anywhere, depending on your economic situation, somewhere in the range from anywhere from $0 up until probably about $50-$70. But then again, if you look at it, I think, look at, as I say, Fubo, they're a really interesting model, charging $50 a month for a subscription, but obviously they're playing on the heartstrings of passion and sports and those kind of things. So I would imagine it would be there. But, Philippe made a really excellent point before, which is exactly right, which is there's only so many people in the world with so many hours in the day and a finite amount of time. So it's it's an attention warfare at the end of the day. And if I'm the consumer, if I'm paying for it or if I'm watching it with ads, ultimately, as long as the content is there and entertaining enough, they're going to get my attention. And that's really what you're fighting for. The question is in the nuances in the monetization method.
I want to get back to what it is that compels them to do that. Philippe, what do you think about sweet spot and what people's tolerance will be?
Yeah, so I think we know we have Crackle consumers who are using us as a complement to Netflix or others. We also have a lot of consumers who are only watching Avod because a lot of Americans can't afford right now to even
$10 a month
$15 a month or $20 or $50 a month. And I think when we work in media, we tend to think of an ad-free experience as the norm almost, because obviously we're all subscribers to these services, to the SVOD services. But the reality for the consumer is that they can't afford it. Now, Avod, as we know, is a much better experience than traditional TV. So compared to that, certainly it's not a bad experience for them. And watching ads every 15 minutes is a fair price to pay, I would say, for the content. So yeah, I think we're both a complement for certain type of consumers, but also the primary, I think, source of content for others. And we get it from our comments. The comments we get from consumers who are saying, basically, if it was not for you, I would not have access to that type of content. And we feel that's part of our mission as an Avod service as well, is to provide access to content for free to consumers.
So I think one of the factors that, at least for now, is driving a lot of the, well, it doesn't. I was going to say the SVOD business is that we have. I said this in my last seminar. Amazon and Netflix did something that I actually thought initially was absolutely insane, which was spending $8, $9, $10 billion on new programming. Well, guess what? The Times found them because they're the only, for all intents and purposes, they're the only source of new programming, voluminous, every week, every month. I mean, I'm hooked on series that I never thought I'd watch in my life because I'm dying for new programming. So I guess my question is, to what degree do you think that the pandemic and the fact that people are voracious consumers right now is driving the just incredible success of Amazon, of all these services? And where do you think it's going to happen when the pandemic, God willing, next week is over? Thank God. Hopefully, maybe one day soon. Philippe, what do you think?
I think we've already seen the drop off in total audience. It reached its peak really in April, and then started to come back to not normal. I think it's going to stay much higher than it used to be, and it's just an acceleration of the trend we were expecting. That consumers were shifting anyway to streaming, so that only accelerated during the pandemic. I still find it interesting, for example, that Netflix just started offering free content, to attract people to their platform, or that you're seeing the new so-called AVODs platforms like Peacock have actually 3 tiers, a little bit like Hulu. And so I think all these services are still testing, pricing and figuring out at what level they're going to get consumers to pay or not pay.
And versus pricing, including longevity.
Right. And I think a lot of these big companies right now are edging their bets by having all different kinds of models, whether it's Avod, SVOD, different tiers, which I think can be, for the consumer could be confused because you're watching Peacock and you're seeing you being upsold for a certain tier. And then, and I think you're back to the cable days when before you knew it, suddenly your bill doubled.
Yeah.
We have to be very careful about not recreating that feeling of angst, from the consumers not knowing how much they're going to be charged next month. And I think, these costs creeping on you is one of the factors that, I think is going to impact consumers' adoption and of paid services versus saying, you know what, I'm going to stay with Avod. I know at least I'm not going to be charged. And that's what we tell them. We say, don't worry, we'll never charge you for anything.
No subscription fee. Yeah. Henry, what do you think in terms of how the pandemic has had an impact and whether it's, inflating to some degree, the number of viewers, and will it last? Will they stay, or are they going to migrate other places?
Yeah, I mean, I think Philippe sort of, touched on it as well, and he's right that, I think we probably hit peak in April time, and I think we probably hit saturation point. That's what it is. I know from my own viewing habits, eventually I was like, you know what, enough TV tonight. I'm not watching another series. I've watched The Crown too many times now. I don't need to see it again. And Narcos, forget it, and I'm actually sort of withdrawing a little bit and sort of trying to sort of, pull away. So I think there is a saturation point. I think undoubtedly COVID has accelerated the transition from linear to digital. I think also demographically, obviously.
Linear, just to be specific, you mean broadcast television?
Yeah, sorry, semantics. Yeah, so essentially, someone using Comcast or one of those sort of like linear TV things. It certainly accelerated that process just again because it's free, it's cheaper, and obviously I think the user experience, it's on demand, it's a better experience. I just came back from staying at my mother-in-law's and I was going mad having to use their sort of dish thing. It's a horrible experience. And then obviously if you're late, you miss it and those things. So I think it's definitely accelerated, as with all of things. I think just thinking like the 2008 recession, it accelerated the advertising budgets from print media into display advertising. So there's always these cycles and these sort of rotations that are happening. So I think, as you say, it's all boats have risen with the tide, which is good for the digital side of it. And then to Philippe's point as well, the cost creeping up as well. It's interesting to see everyone's pricing strategies. I think Disney were really smart coming in low at $4.99. Oh, yeah. And all they know is what they're like 60 odd million subscribers now. And all they have to do is just turn that $1 every year and a half or so. And all of a sudden, before you know it, they're charging $7-8 on 60, 100 million subscribers.
And it didn't hurt that 800,000 people signed up in one day to watch Hamilton.
Exactly. And it said that, and then that goes back to another value proposition, which is the offering and the content offering, as you say, and we see this on Crunchyroll on our service, where we get users coming and subscribing for 3 months, binging a series, and then waiting till the final episode and then dropping off and then waiting till something comes on. So you have to kind of program your offering in a way to sort of obviously try and keep your users from churning because it's competitive out there. And as you say, if you don't have what people are offering at the right price point, believe me, they've got plenty of other choices and they can go elsewhere for free.
That brings me to a good segue into something else I wanted to talk about, which is how do we keep our customers happy, or how do we keep our customers, period?
Yeah.
So, I mean, again, Henry, you have a significant niche. I want to hear from both of you guys, but again, in the context of you, pretty much owning that world, and growing it, I've watched you guys from the beginning. I mean, it's just been incredible what you've done. How do you keep them happy? How do you keep them coming back? How do you keep them at all?
Yeah, I think it goes back to that big and broad answer versus the verticalized and specialized, and because we're in that niche, as you say, it all comes back to fans and community. That's really what it is. It's about fans and sort of, enabling sort of, relationships, connections, and essentially sort of, supporting our fans no matter what. So there's other models that we have, or other business line items and revenue streams that we have. So we have a games division, we have a merchandising business selling obviously figurines, which is just booming. We have, this weekend, for a quick plug, we have virtual Crunchyroll Expo. So it's like the Comic-Con of anime, if you like. Yeah. So we've got 40,000 registered users coming to that online. So it's, that's how you sort of keep them there, is just, is just fostering that community. And then obviously we have a huge audience development and social media team just sort of, reacting and interacting. So it's really just about sort of, just as I say, being a sort of a brand and standing for something, and then obviously, and sort of making people sort of be able to want to come together and sort of express their opinions in that community. And that's how we do it. Obviously, Netflix couldn't have a Netflix con, I don't imagine, just because it was like, what would what do you go there for?
So for what you do, you actually do have a community. You have the kind of product, having once personally worked for an anime company 100 years ago, I understand that community. Philippe, how about for you? How do you keep them happy? How do you keep them at all?
Well, for us, it has to be all about content, obviously, because even though you might be free, you need to provide a quality of content and a variety of content that will bring them back again and again. I think Crackle and Hawk Conflicts both have been around for a long time. We have a de facto or built-in fan base, and it's very interesting because even when compared to some of the brands that have done more marketing in the last few years or have been acquired by large companies like media groups, when you survey the consumers, our brands are coming very high, in recognition and brand trust also. So we have a big responsibility in terms of providing them a fresh content, really on a regular basis. And Crackle has been known also for many years for its original content. We did overhaul a little bit our original strategy, but original and exclusive content is really how we attract them.
Well, you did have comedians in cars.
Yes, absolutely. And so we've just accelerated that strategy over the last year. We have every month at least one original film or series. We have a lot of exclusive content. And the reason we're able to do that is because we have a sister company within Chicken Soup for the Soul Entertainment, as you know, called Screen Media Ventures. And Screen Media is basically a content, acquisition and syndication company. So we have access to a lot of content that they're able to find around the world, festivals and other markets, but also here in the US. They have a tradition of having worked with a lot of independent producers and filmmakers. And so I think we have a unique offering of these kinds of movies and TV shows. And recently, we've also expanded into new categories of content. We have more documentaries, a lot of, I would say, inspirational content that is in the line of our company, corporate DNA with Chicken Soup for the Soul. And we are seeing, very, very strong feedback from our users who are saying, you know what, this is different. This is, and once again, we may not be 100% of their streaming time, but they know what to get, what they're going to get when it comes to Crackle. And so that original content is really what's driving, I think, return visitors.
I in my own case, in my own channels, Watch Free Flicks and my genre channels, I agree with you guys. I mean, I have a community, not in the way that Henry has a community, which all communicate with each other, but I have a very solid fan base because I keep giving them what they want. I mean, my strategy is don't give them what I like, give them what they want. And in my particular case, my channels are pretty much known. My main channel, Watch Free Flicks, is pretty much known for, tons of horror, action, thriller. And because I continue to look for libraries every day and license them on a non-exclusive basis, I'm adding, hundreds and hundreds of movies every month. And I think that's one of the reasons that they keep coming back. But I add the movies and the content that I know that they want to watch. I mean, I mentioned in my last in the last seminar that I did, and I don't know if you guys have this. I assume you have, probably do. It's amazing to me. I mentioned this last time. When I get my report every day, it is incredible to me. And I have about 3,000, 3,500 movies. I add about 300 or 400 a month. But it's amazing to me that 90% of all of my films and TV shows get at least one view per day. It's incredible to me. I mean, I wake up, it blows my mind. I mean, so it means two things: that obviously people are watching a lot of things. The attention span of the viewer. It's not like, when I watch a movie, because my critical audience is probably 18 to 34 males, although I have tons of great foreign films and romance, but they like action, horror, thriller, adventure, and that's my stock in trade. It brings me, it makes me think of another question for us in terms of how you drive your viewership. In a couple of the seminars that I've both led and been in, social media has become a critical part of our business. In my particular case, I haven't yet used it a lot because of the nature of my audience, but I'm curious as to how you guys use social media, if at all, and I assume you do, to drive your viewership, and does it have an impact? Henry?
Yeah, I mean, social media is one of the key sort of, on-ramps for us in a way, both for, attracting new users and sort of getting the word out, but also as well enabling our community to be able to engage with each other and sort of feel the passion. As I say, we have an audience development team that just keeps growing. And, I think the social followers we have are in the sort of, many tens of millions. So, when they're happy, they really tell us about it. But conversely, when they're unhappy, we hear about it very loud and clear, and all of a sudden, something gets done about it. So it really is, empowering that community, supporting them, and obviously enabling them, and that's, social media is a big component of that.
But you love when they get back to you when they're unhappy, because it means they're passionate about what you're doing.
And you're exactly right. The worst thing that could happen is, at a restaurant, someone just says, yeah, it was fine, gets up and walks away and never comes back. But you want people to complain and tell you what's wrong so you can be better.
Right. You go to a Broadway show and say the lighting was good.
Exactly. And we've had this situation where we've run ads, and we have a sort of a hard policy of like no political ads, just because anytime, and it happens sometimes, some political ads slip through the programmatic nets because they've not been tagged correctly or something. And believe me, we hear about it very quickly. So we have to get it shut down.
How about on your side?
So I think what we've seen is we actually don't spend any money on social per se, in buying audience through social media, but we really leverage the the cast and the people who are part of our programming. So since we have our original series or movies or exclusive coming out, every time we have new content every month, we use a lot of PR, but we also bring in the crew, the actors, the producers, and we have them help with their social followers.
Wow.
And that's been very successful. When we launched Going From Broke last fall, which was our reality series, really produced by Ashton Kutcher, around student debt. I mean, it was actually a pretty tough topic, but we had every contributor in every show, talk to their followers, and Ashton himself promoted it, and this had a great impact. And now when we have, Robot Bruce, for example, a great movie coming out in October on an exclusive basis, we get the main actor and the crew to tweet it and post it, and that is part of the fan base, right? Because then our users feel like the cast is talking to them directly, and therefore they can watch and come and feel like it's special when it comes to Crackle or Popcornflix.
Wow, that's
the other part I would say is YouTube. I mean, we have a pretty established presence on YouTube for Popcornflix. It's growing rapidly now on Crackle. And I think it's a great way also to put the brand out there and to recruit this fan base for apps.
Yeah, I want to get back to again, kind of the topic of what this panel is based on, the topic I created of AVOD versus SVOD. I'm curious as to how you guys feel about where this is going to move over the next, let's say, year. COVID notwithstanding, let's leave that out of it for the second. Where is these elements of the industry going to move? Are we going to see, for instance, more and more major companies getting into the SVOD space? Are we going to see a lot of the major companies who have yet to find the AVOD space that this is, something they're going to do? Are we going to? I'm curious. I have my own thoughts, and I'll say them after you guys are done. But Henry, what do you think?
I think it's going to be two things: consolidation and bundling. That's what's going to happen. I think there's already a lot of players in the market. There's a lot of choice, and I think there's probably a lot of companies that are probably not as profitable as they would like to be. So there will be some opportunities for some M&A or some companies that will bleed out. That's on the sort of the consolidation side, and then I think the bundling side of it. If you look at it from the user experience perspective, again, I have an Apple TV and I have to come out of one app to go into another app to go and look for another app. And it's like, oh, what was that movie? Was it on Peacock? Was it on Netflix? Was it on Prime? Was it on Max? Where do I go? So you're starting to see a lot of these, the main ones are obviously sort of, Fire TV, Roku, and sort of Apple TV doing these bundling packages, which makes it easier for the consumer, which is a good thing for the consumer. But I think it then has a problem and a knock-on effect on the business model for the actual publishers themselves or the sort of distributors, depending on what sort of semantics you want to use. Because the problem is in this sort of direct-to-consumer age, you want to be direct-to-consumer and have that relationship with the consumer, right? So you want their email address, you want their viewing habits, their consumption behaviors, and opportunities to cross-sell and upsell them. When you go into those bundles, the problem is what happens is you will gain additional reach and distribution and ultimately revenue, but you will lose that relationship, that direct-to-consumer relationship, because obviously those bundles will get in.
And needless to say, without getting into it, that's one of the sticking points of some major publishers going on certain platforms.
Well, I mean, you can see this already. You're hearing about this with Apple, with whether these Fortnite, these game companies sort of actually saying, listen, you guys are taking a rev share from us and we're deriving a lot more value from you.
Right.
So again, there's going to be some push and pull on that. But again, ultimately, you're going to have to do what the consumer wants, and the consumer will want bundling. And as I mentioned before, we've gone from that cycle of bundling, distributed, siloed, and we're going back into bundling. So we're going back into these sort of, micro bundles. I think will probably be the sort of, would be a nuanced version of that as well.
Probably good for the industry. Philippe, what do you think about it?
I think if again focused on what are the key driving forces of the market, and I think whatever happens as the outcome, we can only guess. But I have at least three. One is advertising. Advertising shifting from television and looking for new places to go. So advertising following the consumer, which always happens, never failed in history. Sometimes it takes longer than you think, whether it was a year of mobile or shift to the web. But I think with the rapid shift to Avod, for example, or to streaming, I think the big companies are going to want to catch their share, and they want to protect their overall business. So I think that means Avod is going to be a driving force because they need to capture these dollars they're losing from the traditional TV. I think the second big trend is walled garden of content. These big companies building basically all their services around their own content. They own it and they want to promote it. They go back deep into their libraries and they want to limit access to that content to their own services. So that's why all the big media groups are basically building these walls right now and getting back the rights to their content, and they want to keep it to themselves. And so if you want to have access across the board to a lot of content, I think you're going to have to use different services, because there's not going to be one place where you can all access it. And then the third element, which we're strong believers as a company, is TV OEMs. So with every new TV that comes out is now an operating system that allows the consumers to access a lot of content without having Roku, without having Fire TV, dongle basically in the back. And gradually, I believe that they're going to be driving forces, with their own services and aggregating the content themselves. And I think they're becoming quickly competitors to these larger players who thought they were the aggregators. So what I see is actually more fragmentation on one hand, and then more consolidation on the other. I mean, I think it's going to be a conflicting forces, and not sure yet how it's going to end. I think bigger companies are going to want to aggregate, right? They're going to want to own vertically all these different ecosystems, and they're going to want to have SVOD, but also AVOD, and probably those hybrid services may become more and more the norm as a result.
Yeah, in my own experience and my own thoughts about it, I think that again, I do exclusively AVOD because I've always said free is a good price. And I think that you're going to see more and more, not necessarily major companies, because I think most of the major companies have jumped in and have, laid out their positions. But I think there's a bubbling under, a medium-sized, kind of publisher who has a lot of content. They haven't really figured out what their strategy is going to be. They spend a lot of their time in broadcast TV. I'll give you an example, just off the top of my head. Hallmark. I mean, Hallmark has a very big following. I find myself from time to time watching, a Hallmark movie just to get away from all this. And they have yet, as far as I know, and I like what they do. And half the producers are friends of mine from the old days. But at the end of the day, they haven't really created a AVOD strategy. And I think a company like that, of course, they're not asking my opinion, and I'm not giving it, just using an example because I like them so much. I think companies like that, who are big content providers, who have a ready-made outlet, for their Hallmark must do, 20, 30, at least historically, 20, 30 new movies, a year, maybe more. And I think those kinds of companies are going to go into the AVOD space. They're going to build up an audience in the AVOD space. And then at the appropriate time, they're going to bring in, as you said, Philippe, other tiers and a hybrid model. I think that's one of the things that's going to marry the AVOD and the SVOD business. Again, we have the big players, we have the smaller players who are holding their own, and then we got people in the middle. I'd be a person in, a company in the middle. Longevity, lots of viewers, growing. But I think that is part of the future of where this is going, that companies are going to discover, oh my God, we have all these assets. We're not exploiting them to the best that we can. And how are we going to do that? And at the end of the day, I think that's one of the places it's going to happen. Let me ask you a question I asked my last panel. What is it that we don't have in this industry? And I mean, widest expanse. What are the things that you'd like to see the industry do that would further, all of our businesses? I mean, whether it be, whether it be uniform metadata, or whether it be that there's an opportunity for different publishers to help each other in different ways, even though we're competitors for eyeballs, we may be complementary in terms of how we promote each other because, in my case, if I partnered with Henry and took a bunch of his content and put it on my channel under Crunchyroll, and he took a bunch and put it under Watch Free Flicks because we have different audiences, maybe that's something. So what do you guys think about things you might want to see in the industry that happen that could further everybody's goodwill? Henry, take a stab.
Wow, so that's the most broadest, and this could get really technical very quickly and very very deep.
Well, stay away from the technical. I'm just really talking about the broad stroke.
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, it's all we want to do is just enable our community and help engage our fans more. So I think, it's really interesting to see. I think, look, at the end of the day, the technology that we're looking for already probably exists, whether it's some small startup or it's still sort of, in its infancy. I think there's some really interesting companies out there like Caffeine and these kind of like streaming who do these sort of like co-viewing. Twitch is a big example of this as well. So, and I think, particularly as we've all become a lot more siloed and insulated, we're not going to the cinemas anymore. We're not watching movies, or this old sort of, terminology of Netflix and chill and like come over as well. That doesn't happen anymore, right? So it's not happening as much due to obviously restrictions because of all things COVID. So I imagine that, we're certainly probably going to get to some sort of like co-viewing world where we're watching stuff on demand, but at the same time where just like us, we can have these screens and then we can go and watch the final episode of, The Crown on Netflix, or, get Game of Thrones, and oh my God, can't believe that happened, and we get to sort of share in it together. So I think there's going to be a lot more sort of, lot more sort of like, community elements around that. And then also as well, there's going to undoubtedly on the advertising side, on the Avod side, there's going to be new ad products in terms of interactivity and sort of reaction. We're already seeing that as well, where there's trade-offs. There's interesting company about, sort of like watch this ad, and engage with it, and then we'll deprecate the ad load for the remainder of the episodes and these kind of things. So we're going to certainly see a lot more innovation in ad products. And then what I don't think we have at the moment is also as well, we're still sort of stuck in this very much that, again, as you say, SVOD, AVOD. And maybe there's some hybrid with a bit of SVOD, AVOD, but what about the sort of like whole economics of it as well? Is there some tokenization element of it as well? And is there some element there? So I think we're going to start to see new sort of models and sort of economic offerings as well in terms of like trading time and consumption for something in a way.
Great. Philippe, what do you think? What do we need? What other thing? What should the industry be doing that help each other? What needs to be developed?
So I think it's all about consumers, and if one, how do we educate the consumer? How do we simplify for the consumer the content discovery? As we said, there's so many different platforms and services, and it's more complex every day. Every day, Zumo or Philo or one of those are launching new channels, bringing new partners, including Crackle. So we're excited to have more and more distribution, but we're going to go from 25 to maybe 35 platforms soon to reach more consumers. And it seems all very complex and confusing, I think, to the consumers. So I don't know, maybe one place where they can actually look for what they're looking for and find it. And go there to actually watch it, and I don't know what that looks like. On the advertising side, I totally agree with Henry. I think improving the user experience is key as well. What he mentioned is exactly what we're doing with OTT.X, which is we're offering an interactive ad at the beginning of a show, and then an ad-free experience for the rest of the episode. And I think everybody wins because the consumer gets one good ad experience and then freedom. The advertiser actually gets very high value interaction with that consumer, and we get higher CPMs and a better consumer, a more happy consumer. So there are some of those I think tools and experiences that can improve the user experience. And then I think on partnerships, certainly, I mean, we're big with partnerships at Crackle. We do partner with Crunchyroll also. I think there's an opportunity to complement each other on the business side in many, many ways.
I'd like to see more of that because I think I find, I partnered with some friends who are the publishers where we have completely different audiences, right, where I billboard them, on my channel, the genre and their name of their channel, and I get great content. It's a niche of my content, right, and we both get to win. I wanted to mention to those people who are watching us, we'd love to take some questions. So hopefully you're not sending us questions yet, is because you're riveted by the conversation, which we hope is the case. But if you have questions, we'd love to take them. There's another area that I've always been curious about that I've never really seen develop. And I mentioned this in my last seminar, but I'm curious about what you guys think. Because we're always looking at how we get, more revenue, how we get more promotion without having to go spend a fortune of money to do that, because that eats directly into our bottom line. So the analogy I used in my last panel was every football stadium in the country is built by some sponsor, whoever it is, Lincoln Financial Field here in Philadelphia, where I live. Yet I see that on a very, very limited basis, in our industry. And I'm always amazed at why that is the case. I mean, we all have, I'm smaller than you guys, but I still have a couple of million viewers every month. That still has a great value to some sponsor. I mean, maybe I'm going to call it, Avis's Watch Free Flicks. I mean, why? I mean, have you guys had any experience with this? And if not, why is this not a thing?
I think that's an interesting concept, and it all depends on the value proposition. I think the difference is your stadium analogy is obviously it's a destination, but I don't think the San Francisco Giants would never change their name to the Salesforce Giants or something.
If
I
like own them, they would.
And that's the difference. But then, as you say, then you lose that. The whole point is it's such a competitive marketplace out there. Your brand has to represent and stand something. And if they're seen as sort of selling out or just sort of changing it for any brand that's sort of prepared to put a few bucks in their pocket, again, there's choice elsewhere, and I don't think that would sort of would be there. Now, in terms of different ad products, can you do carousels, banners, and sort of certain ad units? Then absolutely. And can you do sponsored streams? And Philippe mentioned a partner OTT.X, which we all sort of very well and intimately know. You have those abilities to do sort of like takeovers and those kind of things, so you can sponsor weekends. But I think the moment you start sort of diluting your brand by sort of letting someone sort of slap their logo on it, it's a quick way to sort of churn a lot of customers away.
Philippe, what do you think?
Yeah, I think there's actually great opportunities in that area, and we have decent amount of sponsorships that we're selling into either within the shows that we're producing, and when you produce original content, especially not in scripted. It's not like we're selling car placement. That happened at Crackle in the past, right? Selling a car placement into a show, and that will happen, but it's not our main focus right now. But when we do a show like Going From Broke, and Chegg is a main sponsor, their CEO is the host of the show. Oh, wow. And it actually is the most successful original show ever.
What is that show? I'm not familiar. What is the show about?
Going From Broke. So that's the one I was mentioning earlier, which is about student debt. So we're following each episode a young couple or a young professional who is 3 years into trying to make a living. Has $300,000
by debt.
Right, and you follow their, so basically it's an intervention. You look at their finances, you actually help them turn it around, and some of them succeed, some don't. But it's a very dramatic show. Tough topic, but as I said, really resonated with the audience, because I think the Avod audience is actually very sensitive to money issues, and I think the presence of Chegg made sense. And they actually provide a lot of, information within the show. But it didn't seem like, you wouldn't think of it, oh my God, it's kind of an editorial. It's not. It's actually a very well produced show. Ashton produced it for us, and we had 5 main sponsors actually built into that show. Wow. So I think that's one way we work with brands, and we have these discussions constantly, with new programming that frankly would not exist if we didn't have a sponsor. And we're working right now on programming that I hope will happen and we'll be very proud of, that would not be your typical show and probably wouldn't get funded if it was not for supporting a sponsor. The second thing what we're doing is every single day trying to get these sponsored channels or themes, verticals. There've been a couple of cases in the past, but we're ramping up that effort, and I think we're very close. There are certain, especially as we go into lifestyle categories, and think about Crackle used to be gamers, right, on Xbox and PS4 or PS3, at the time. And now we've expanded, our audience reach to really the general public. And so as we go into DIY or cooking or, any of those particular categories, the association with certain brands makes sense, like any other media. And I think that will create new opportunities for us, and having a direct sales effort and direct sales team is very important, obviously. Otherwise, if you just sell programmatically on your platform, you wouldn't be able to develop the
and those categories would be sponsored by, Cuisinart, if it's a cooking show like that. It's great.
About like hybrid product placements effectively, or paid for content in a way by sponsors, right? Which obviously makes sense. And that brings an interesting question that I had for both of you guys is, there is, because there are so many streaming services and there's so much licensable amount of content out there, it sounds like you're having to go to the edge, Philippe, and start sort of building rather than buying, because obviously sort of what is available is just kind of the valuable things obviously just get sucked up into the Netflix and all the other sort of premium SVODs who can obviously pay the better rates. So do you guys find it appears that there's never been a better time to be a producer of content just because there's so much opportunity and supply, correct?
Absolutely. And we have not only Screen Media, buying content and syndicating content across platform, by the way, which allows us to buy projects or movies, monetize them, on other platforms, and then getting them pretty much for free, I would say, on Crackle. So that's great. But we also have now 2 production houses producing, feature films and TV series. So eventually, yes, you have to own your content. Whether you own a library or you produce your own content. I think long term, if you don't have privileged access to content, you're going to have a really, really tough time as just a platform.
Yeah, I used to say, years ago, we used to say content is king. And then at some point, distribution became king. Content is king again. And in my particular case, I would agree it's a great time for producers if producers could produce, and hopefully soon again they will. But it's surely a great time for library owners. And I find that my full-time job is both fielding calls from those library owners who are calling me who want to put content up, and I'm happy to talk to everybody, and also reaching out to libraries, because for me, again, it gets back to the discussion of new programming. Why are the broadcast channels basically losing viewership, and why ultimately might they fail? They right now did not do what Netflix did. They didn't do what Amazon did. They didn't store, seasons of programming, which doesn't really make any sense, except all of us have spent so much time in Hollywood, we understand why that didn't happen. But at the end of the day, when I get a library of, let's say, 100 movies or 200 movies, and that product might be X amount of years old, not too old, it's old to the world, but it's new to my viewers. So at the end of the day, I think it's an incredible time for people who own large or even small, libraries, because now I'm hungry for it. I've always wanted it, but now I'm actually voracious for it. So, that's something. I wanted to ask you guys about live events and live television on your channels. And I mean that in the broadest sense. I'm not talking about sports. I'm talking about things that are particular to your viewers, your community, especially, Philippe, when you mention, you got the actors, you got this. To what degree have you or are you considering using, and do that technology to do so, live promotions or live anything on your channel to both promote or maybe even as ongoing programming? Henry?
So on the live side of things, it's a little bit different when we're animation, right? So it can't, so the things that we do in terms of like linear is obviously we have a block on Adult Swim, obviously with our sort of, sister company, well, the sort of parent company, Warner Media. So we distribute that way from the live side of things. But again, it all comes down to your genre, right? We don't sort of, sort of have that sort of ability to go live. What we do is have the ability to do simulcast. So the idea is we license a lot of our anime from Japan. Obviously, it airs obviously on Friday, and then we sort of have to sort of get it. Content operations team get it, put all the subtitles up, and then encode it, and then obviously sort of load it up onto the servers. So there's a bit of a gap there. So it's not so much live; it's just about how quickly can we make it readily available to them. Mm-hmm. And in terms of the actual live side of things as well, there's we have, we launched the Anime Awards, which is kind of like just think the Oscars for anime. So we do that as a live show, but again, that's, sort of, that's 2 hours per year effectively.
Oh, you did do it as a live show.
Yeah, we did it as a live show, obviously, and then you have it there, and you have obviously.
Did it get a good response?
I mean, it's phenomenal. It just keeps growing every year. You know, we mainly distribute it on Twitch and obviously on our own platform.
Exactly what I'm talking about. I mean, I'm about to hopefully do some of these things on my channel. Philippe, how about on your end of things? I mean, I just think this is an underexplored, surely underused opportunity, just because it's complicated in some cases. Philippe?
Right. Well, it is complicated technically for now. So I think that's what's been, holding us off. We did last year. We're very close. If we had the technology to broadcast the Saturn Awards, for example, which are basically the Crackle core genre of it and strong interest, we did end up running it after the awards, the full show. But we're kind of jealous that we couldn't go live with it. Now we're looking at new formats with our original productions, which could be, if not live, almost live, and play on this social / streaming kind of connection. And I'm hoping we can come up with something on that. And I think, for us, it's not live, but linear is the closest thing I think we're gonna get to in terms of live, which is totally new for Crackle. Crackle never had a linear channel.
Are you about to get into that business?
We have at least five platforms that are going to be launching by the end of the year. We have many more in discussion, and I think it seems to be a great way for content delivery, for consumers to find content, because again, I mean, you have different options, right? You can go and search on a VOD platform for content, or you can, go through an EPG, as most people do now, and look for content. And there is something familiar, maybe from the old cable days, where people are just scanning through the channels and finding content, and then once they find it, they can go back and watch it from the beginning.
So is there an irony that it brings us back to basically television? I mean, I'm curious. Let's just, we got about 15 minutes left here. Let's talk about linear just for a minute, because I think it's kind of it's an area that especially because you have two or three major linear channels that kind of dominate the business, and I suspect there's going to be many more. I'm just curious as to what you two guys think about the future of linear in general, and whether or not it's something that's going to grow, exponentially, or is it just something that's going to be an also ran in terms of the three platforms, SVOD, AVOD, and linear? Henry, what do you think?
So look, this is the old sort of like, will print media or will radio ever go away? No, there will always be a space for it. I think, look, news and sports are the main reasons obviously live and linear exist, because you can have that ability to put on a live feed. I think, again, and Philippe made the point as well about how that sort of, on demand versus linear is kind of like lean in search and discovery versus curation, right? And again, there are times where I just get completely overwhelmed with choice and like, where do I start? Where do I begin? So going to a linear option and being like, oh, look, they have, Gladiator is on, and sure, I'm 20 minutes into it, but that's fine. Okay, no problem. I'll watch it. So I think there will always be a space for it and a place for it. It's just, again, technology has enabled on demand and playback and all of these kind of things. So it will never go away. But obviously, we're seeing obviously just this boom and this surge in on demand. But to your point, it's what is old is then new, and what is new is then old. And again, it all goes in those cycles of lives and those trends and the ups and downs.
And Philippe, what do you think about linear?
I think it's to me, it's more of a electronic programming guide. Basically, it's a place where people can find content rather than go and watch it. And so, if it can drive more people to watch on demand, I think that's great. I do think it's going to be also driven by the TV OEMs or the operating systems into the TVs, because when you turn on a new Samsung right now, you've got TV Plus showing up right away, and it's very easy to just start scrolling and looking for content. And I think that's going to be a growing consumer habit of going and discovering content that way, rather than going to a certain app directly, or downloading that app and watch from that app. So I think it's just one way. I think the hardware is going to drive some of the consumer experience.
I see some countdown on my thing here. I think it's just the recording part. But if in 15 minutes we're not here anymore, which I think we will be, 15 seconds, I mean, you'll know that something happened. But let's assume in 6 seconds we're still going to be here. In the final few minutes of this panel, just in general, and this has been a great discussion. And again, we'll still take questions if anybody has them. We're still here. Okay. And just in terms of the general future of the business, just in general, I mean, just some thoughts on if this were 30 years ago, people would be talking about going to the moon, and then we did, and now they're talking about going to Mars, and then who knows? What do you see? Are there any things that you see on the horizon, that you think are going to either change the business or enhance the business? I mean, just made up out of your head. Different than the question I asked before, what would you like to see? What do you think is going to happen? Like, for instance, in my case, I think that broadcast television is dead and gone. I mean, I think it's an older audience. Millennials are not buying TVs. I think they're hooked on everything that we're doing. And I think that broadcasters would be very wise to start moving, their dollars into our side of the business, and also to start reinventing themselves. I don't really want to see them go away, but I think they have to take some lessons, like I said before, from the Netflixes and the Amazons, and start doing more innovative. I mean, in the simplest terms, get rid of the laugh track, because that's from 1950. So I think we're going to see less and less in the broadcast space and regular, linear television. We're going to see a lot more that's going to happen in terms of higher profile, new, at least Avod players coming into the business, because unless you have some significant brand, it's not a building they will come, for any SVOD. I mean, look at what Crunchyroll did. I watched them in the beginning. They built an amazing business, to the credit of everybody there, Henry. And, it's a serious major brand. But in the beginning, it was where you went for, anime. Now it's a major destination. So what do you guys see as, a trend? We're going to, let's talk about this, and then we'll see if anybody has questions, and then, we'll call it a day. Henry?
Yeah, so I think, to your point about broadcasting is I wouldn't say it's dead. I think there will always be a place for it, but I think you're already seeing that shift. You look how, as I say, Comcast have come out with Peacock, and HBO Max has suddenly become, Time Warner has morphed into Warner Media and, become HBO Max. So I think you're sort of seeing that shift because, they just have to. But the other interesting thing is you see, companies like Fox going and buying Tubi TV and, these other guys. And the reason they've had to go and do that is because these new digital platforms have stolen their audience and stolen their eyeballs for advertising purposes. And these guys have got hundreds of millions of dollars in advertising bookings, and they don't have the supply. So they're like, holy hell, we've got to go and get these eyeballs. So again, it's sort of the natural sort of evolution and the disruption. And again, these, it's the sort of the linear players, the analog players in the digital world, right? That's very much the case.
Right.
So, I think that's already happening. Again, these companies are sort of modernizing as well. But actually, if you don't mind, I have a question. Both
please.
Is obviously you have pure Avod offerings. And obviously, you've both mentioned about sort of free, and obviously, people don't have enough money to sort of pay for these kind of things. how does that sort of impact your conversations in terms of conversations with advertisers? Because if I'm an advertiser, I'm saying, what value does your audience have? How much do they earn? What demographic are they? And all of those kind of things. So do you ever find yourself sort of, having that challenge to say these are actually valuable eyeballs, whereas the counter argument would be, well, if they're low income, they don't have that much disposable income, so why should I bother advertising?
Well, I have an answer for that, and Philippe probably has a more qualified answer, because I'm not a tech guy. That's why I have a great ad ops team. But here's my layman answer to that. As you know, the targeting has gotten so specific for the advertisers that even though I don't get the information, they get the information. So when they come into my channels, they already know who the car buyers are, who the watch buyers are, who's buying perfume, who's buying this. And what's become interesting is, the CPMs, of course, get up or down depending on how cherry picked they want to take from my inventory. So at the end of the day, it's getting more and more and more sophisticated. And even though I don't really get the best that I can do, because I'd have to spend an enormous amount of money to have the same information that they have. It's not going to change my life, because fortunately, they seem to like my viewers a lot. But at the end of the day, they know who they want to go after. And I've been doing this now, for a long time. But at the end of the day, my salespeople, pitch them on, these are basically, take a look at the demo. They're basically 18 to 34 males, although we have, a wide range of other viewers. And anything that you would sell in that range is going to sell extremely well on the Watch Free Flicks channels. And if you're looking for genre, if you're looking for a more highbrow audience who loves documentaries or loves foreign films, I have that too. So in my case, we pitch it more generically, because, they're going to know, what they're going to get once they're on it. And it is slightly a conundrum. Philippe?
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, obviously our household income is not bad at all. I mean, and of course, some consumers can't afford to pay big bucks for cable, but I have a lot of wealthy friends who love cheap and free stuff as well. And as we just said, I think the fact we have an addressable audience, and everything is targeted nowadays to the right consumer,
yeah.
Creates a lot of value. 10% only of our audience overlaps with cable or traditional TV. So this is what we call the enrichables, audiences that you can't reach anywhere else. You certainly can't reach them on Netflix. And so SVOD, in a way, is helpful to the Avod business, because it makes that pie of addressable audience smaller. The more people watch Netflix, the more precious the Crackle audience is to brands.
I agree with that.
And advertisers. So that in that way they codependent, I think. So I think, I was going to answer the other question that.
Please.
I think TV screens are becoming bigger and cheaper, and that technology is becoming kind of de facto omnipresent everywhere. What I would love to see, and I think it's going to happen at some point, is how do you operate all that, within smart homes? We want to simplify our lives, but the streaming world is just getting more complicated and fragmented right now. So at some point in the future, I do believe that whether it's through operating systems within those TVs, or someone's grabbing all that content into one place, we need a unified offering to consumers, because and maybe it will be a consolidation of big media groups, and they're buying, as Comcast is doing, they're buying all the different pieces and putting the puzzle together, and that's Viacom, and that's tomorrow it's going to be Discovery, and all these big groups need to build that ecosystem, and they're going to compete. Maybe some of them will win, some of them will lose, and and then the cycle will start over again. We'll have new way of consuming media that will be driven by startups and smaller creative companies.
Yeah, for me, answering that question, just adding a little bit more, and then we're going to bring this to a close. I think we're in an incredibly exciting time in terms of the digital space, in terms of verticals, in terms of niches, in terms of giving consumer good value. I think I agree with Philippe. I think it's extracting from what you were saying, that it can get very confusing, for the consumer. I mean, in my own case, I think I signed up for 4 channels in the last couple of weeks, and I don't remember. I don't know how to get out of them. I wanted to see a program. I had to sign up to do it. I wanted to see some show, and next thing you know, wait a minute, there's nothing else in here I want to watch. And how many of these did I buy? Because I was just flipping through the channels. So I think it's a really great time, for, as Henry said, for producers, especially when COVID's over and starting now. In Europe, I know a bunch of friends who are doing productions in the EU countries. This is going to end at some point, God willing, sooner than later. I think it's getting very established that there are a lot of very good and strong channels, including those that are represented here, and that there'll be more people and more players coming onto the market who still, after all these years, I call it 12 years, after all these years, have still said, well, I don't know exactly what I'm going to do with my content. I don't want to give it away, because it's going to be free. Well, I say to them, free is a good price because the advertiser is going to be there. So, pretty much in closing, I think we're in the right space. I think, COVID has surely, pumped up, the visibility and the viewership, for all of us, and mainly on the discovery piece. And I think, those of us who are creating will continue to do that. And basically, it's going to be a fun ride. I want to thank you guys. It was a great discussion. Look forward to doing more. And good luck. And I want to thank the audience. It's always a good sign when the people who were there at the beginning are still here at the end. You guys can't see it, but everybody who started out with us is here, and there's actually even a few more. So thanks, everybody, and I think it's time to go eat some dinner for us on the East Coast.
Thanks, Gary, for having me.
Thanks
a lot, guys. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.